Except the humans. When our coalition's exploration drones found the Sol system, we knew just from initial scans that there was nothing much of note there. Most of the planets there were completely devoid of life of any kind, just a handful of barren rocks and gas giants. The only planet that was interesting was the third planet, which scans showed to be filled with life. Over the next several days, our probe scouted the Earth. While it could not see much through the immense amount of space debris that littered the planet, apparently from failed launches into space, it got some intel on what was on the surface. There was a diversity of flora and fauna, an abundance of liquid water that shockingly was littered with specks of stagnant islands of debris, and a sapient species known as humans that seemed to be the cause of the somewhat common structures in the aforementioned space debris. Scans showed there to be just about 8 billion members of this race. The probe continued onwards after a couple weeks of scanning the surface. Its primary mission was to explore a newly discovered system that seemed to be rich in resources, and it wouldn't stop for some out-of-the-way planet on the edge of nowhere. Sure, the humans had realized that they could go to space, but by the amount of debris hovering around their planet, all of their attempts had basically failed. It seemed to most scientists that the humans would need another 400 years before they made ships capable of leaving the Earth, and even more to discover FTL travel on their own. We had never seen such a pitifully slow race before. Most species that tried to get to space would immediately make it their main goal, to break the confines of their home planet. Except the humans. Sometime later, a conflict broke between two member races of the coalition, the powerful, warlike Zanzi and the somewhat newer and much more docile Danique. Everyone knew the Danique were the victims in this war, but knew that they would face the wrath of the Zanzi's powerful military if they interceded. So the Zanzi ships easily glassed and sterilized one world, captured their other planet without so much as a sweat, and used their influence in the Senate to convince their allies in some swing races to kick the Danique out of the coalition. Nobody tried to defend the Danique. They were a fledgling member race, with no representatives in the government, with few outstanding qualities to speak of. Only 10 billion members, a nearly non-existent military, which may have been part of the reason why the Zanzi invaded, and only a handful of FTL-capable ships. They were almost as pitiful as the humans, as one senator noted, and it might be best to send them to the Sol system and test the humans. It would be a waste of resources, after all, to send an actually important race and a new fleet to greet the humans. Why not use the Danique? So the 52 large Danique colony ships and numerous smaller civilian freighters and transports, all carrying their share of the 7 billion who survived the war and weren't enslaved by the Zanzi, jumped on their own to the Sol system, with no support and no turning back. Their ships were packed to the seams with refugees, people with no home to go back to. Nobody would be happy to greet them in the state that they were in. Except, apparently, the humans. Several weeks went by before our second probe reached the Sol system, purpose-built to study how the human and Danique races interacted. By the time it arrived, it brought back news of what happened. The human governments of Earth, and yes, there were many of them, had accepted the Danique into their society. Their planet was teeming with construction, and about half of the ships that arrived at their destination were still orbiting space. Most of the space debris, curiously, was cleared out. It would be a while until they were fully adapted, though. Nobody could handle so many refugees at once, except, as we found out, the humans. As the few researchers tasked with watching the drone footage saw, the residents of Earth adapted extraordinarily quickly to their new situation. They built new structures at blistering speed, utilizing massive machines that simply printed entire cities in just a few weeks. Danique freighters that once shipped cargo now moved in the asteroid belt, mining materials to build new structures and, most surprisingly, new ships. The humans had apparently learned to reverse engineer virtually every technology the Danique had to offer, from particle shields to FTL drives. Vehicles that once were wheeled or tracked were converted to hold anti-gravity nodes. New unique ships, supposedly of human design, were built, and to our shock they proved even faster than the Danique ships to precede them. Never had we seen such industriousness before. On most planets, it took months to build a new ship, and another month if it was to have an FTL drive, which were somewhat rare throughout the coalition. Most coalition ships relied on sunlight engines as FTL drives were too complicated to mass produce and too expensive to make standard issue. Only wealthy intersystem traders or large military carriers or battleships had them, while most other smaller ships like cruisers and frigates didn't have them at all. And on this previously ignored planet, new ships would be built and launched in a week. While some would hover around Earth or the local moon, most would immediately make use of their FTL drives and punch a hole in time-space, traveling to who knows where. By now, our leaders were growing both curious and anxious at this new threat to their way of life. Zanzi generals were vocal about seizing whatever made the humans so efficient, and our Senate capitulated and allowed the Zanzi to assemble a strike force to take back what they believed was rightfully theirs. 100 massive ships, including carriers, destroyers, battleships, frigates, and even a planet-killing dreadnought, all packed with enough firepower to simply subjugate another member race if they wanted. Thousands of small fighters, hundreds of troop transports and landing craft for the eventual takeover of planet Earth. A single planet against the might of a full Zanzi fleet was a pushover, no matter how prepared you were. And there was no way Earth was prepared.